So what world we're creating is in part a function of what's been unfolding. And one of the things that we have learned is that what we have been being told is not what is actually happening, right? The media has a very specific focus, and it really has very little to do with what's happening. So wow. They are focusing on what's, something that will excite your adrenaline. That's their job. They can excite you in a hole. Whatever, however it works, whether it's excitement, very, oh wow, this is amazing, right. Or oh, this is awful. Both of them work, right? So we're going to go around the edges of the mainstream media focused culture and see what's happening in the world. And the first thing we're going to find out is we are much better off than we've been told. Much, much, much better off. So this is a graph that I've been using for a while, and unfortunately it hasn't been updated yet, but I will give you some details beyond it. This is the Human Development Index. It includes a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living. From 1990 to 2015, there's only a couple of countries in the world that went downward. Isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. The black line is the US, and above the US are Norway and Sweden. Switzerland, Norway and Switzerland, yeah. So here's some other indicators. This is, I try to make this black thing go away, and sometimes it wins, and sometimes it doesn't. This is, the top one is literacy. I'm convinced that part of the reason that things are going up is world literacy is going up. So it's starting in 1820 here, starting in 1440 here. Wow. With the invention of the printing press, right? We have this huge increase over the time that the printed word has been made available to a larger public. And these different lines are different countries. The black line is the world overall, right? And there are parts of countries, for example, in India, Kerala, the literacy rate, the poverty rate is very low. There are lots and lots of people in poverty, but they have the highest literacy rate in the country. Wow. Yeah, because they figured out you don't need money to learn how to read. Wow. Right? They figured out social systems that support that kind of education rather than putting it into the economic system. So that we're going to see more and more of that as we keep going. Child labor overall, just in the last 20 years, has continued to decline, had been declining, of course, for a couple of hundred years since the child labor laws started to be implemented in various places. Oh, and I'm making a point. And whenever you see a vertical line like that, usually it's blue. That's close to today. Oh, okay. And then infant mortality. Okay, this is per 1,000 live births, children under 5 passing on. And again, way down worldwide. And the US, I had it highlighted here at one point, is in the middle of this list. It's not the highest. Japan is the one with the least infant childhood. Really? Yeah, we're quite a ways down.
I think that. Oh, yeah, I think you got it highlighted about 6 up from the bottom.
Yeah, okay. Yep, there we go. The United States, right there.
Wow, see that?
That's scary.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and it's mostly people of color or immigrants that are experiencing high infant mortality in our country. Yeah. All right.
So why do we think that is? Lack of access to healthcare?
Or inadequate support services of all kinds, inadequate diets, too much drugs,
like so cultural.
Yeah.
Effects too.
Right. In Portland, for example, during the period of urban removal, 1972 to 1982, all of the grocery stores were removed from the inner city. Wow. So it became a food desert. So you're eating out of convenience stores, right? Wow. Yeah, if you didn't have a vehicle, and most people in the inner city didn't have a vehicle. So there were grocery stores around the edges. You could get to them if you could, or you could take the bus, or you could pay for a taxi. And, you know, you're feeding 4, 5, 6 kids, and here comes the famous Callista now. Yeah, yeah,
With a dog.
I guess there's a seat over there.
yeah. We've got several seats in the room still. Hey there.
Hi.
So glad to see you. We got a seat next to Bush. We got some.
Round table.
Get a chair over.
Okay.
Or you can come be in the middle.
If she doesn't look, man, we look great.
Are you all okay if there's a dog in a crate in the room?
It's hyper intelligent.
Okay?
Hyper cute too.
Under your feet, probably better than away from you.
Yes.
Yeah, under your feet's fine.
So are you suggesting here?
Is that a yes?
If that works.
Yes. that would be perfect. Thank you.
And then maybe we'll give her a TV.
Oh, I'm good.
You might want to take notes, Calista.
Okay.
I'll get it. Thank you.
Oh, I knocked over my water.
Yes, you did. I got it. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate help.
Thank you. Callista is either in love or she's a sucker for punishment.
Yes.
Both. She has taken on a new puppy.
Which makes it 3 flower children's dogs.
All right, so, yes, in the inner city, we have issues all over, and in the barrios, and in what we used to call the ghettos. And this is why the US child infant mortality rate is high.
What made Australia such an anomaly in so many places?
Partly it's relatively low population and a lot of resources.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's kind of like Wyoming in terms of population. So a lot of, you know, wonderful resources and very few people in congestion. And
Excellent healthcare.
And yes, they have excellent healthcare. Also, frankly, they had immigration limits much longer than the US did. Ours changed in 73, and all our statistics changed after that. After we started allowing more people from more countries to come into this country. And it's part of what the people who are saying, make America great again, don't know. Is that prior to 73, only about 20% of the people in the world were allowed to come to this country. And yeah, the immigration laws were shifted in 73. And so that meant that people from the Middle East, people from India, people from China, that, you know, China had always been borderline, people from Africa, people from South America that had not been allowed before 73. Yeah.
Why do you think that they changed the laws then?
Because partly we were losing our labor force, our birth rate was going down, and we needed more immigrants. And we're all experiencing that. Since the immigrants got scared under Trump, you know, they're not applying for jobs, so nobody has the labor that they need, that people who, you know, grew up in entitled households aren't willing to do. Yeah. So, yeah. And those are the people that are having the higher infant mortality rate in our country right now. So wars, this is the Gulf War. This is, you know, sending a whole bunch of people out and all the rest of these, but notice how basically low it is compared. This is violent deaths. This is the actual deaths in wars. We've had, of course, a big jump since Russia invaded the Ukraine. This was World War II. This was World War I. But you can see there were lots of wars going on for a long, long, long time. And now there's only 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of. And these different colors are about people between countries or people in the country or people who are not representing a nation, but they're terrorizing a country. That's what the different colors are. So you can see terrorism went up in 20 and 2001 and so. So compared to, say, 1918, 100 years ago, There are many fewer wars happening in the world today. Compared to any time since World War II, the amount of people dying is a lot smaller. So something to be aware of. Violent deaths, it's been going down. And it's been going down. In the US, in Western Europe, even with the apparent issues around these guns, and people going crazy with their guns, the actual numbers are going way down all over.
They don't
So-
want you to know that though.
No, because then your adrenaline wouldn't be pumping, right? And you wouldn't want to be buying things to make you safe, right? So, we got more people having other ways to, behave and feeling more secure in the world. This is one of my favorites. This is the share of population living in extreme poverty. And extreme poverty is, I don't know where my next meal is coming from. I don't have adequate clothes. I don't have adequate shelter. That's extreme, all right? And this is the share by percent, and this is the actual number in the world. We're hovering, so with an 8 billion people population, all this time the population's been growing, but the number has been going down.
Wow.
Yeah, that is very exciting. I agree. So the world economy is doing better in that way than it has before. How it's doing better is, all kinds of things, some of them nice and some of them not so nice, but yeah. All right, so this is or more indications of poverty. And so this is the poverty line in 2022 for a family of four was $27,750. It was $18,000 for an individual. In Lincoln County, I just checked the numbers, and you can get assistance for a household income for one person of up to $33,000. Yeah, because they're giving money to 138% of the poverty line. Yeah, which is fascinating because we used to only give it to 110%. So, yeah, so this is, again, all the indicators are decrease in all these measures of poverty around the world. So that's part of why you're not seeing quite so many ads for starving children. This
Say that
is,
again. I'm sorry, Ruth, say that again.
that's part of why we're not seeing so many ads with starving children,
Oh,
because there's a lot less of it happening. Yeah. And it is, of course, happening because there are lots of places that through colonialism or through the post-colonial destruction of what was put in place are not able to have the infrastructure for everyone to be fed.
Okay.
Right? But still, that's actually on the decrease too. So we're across the world, we're doing much, much, much better than we were when we were growing up.
And we're told too.
And definitely than you're told, right? So these lines are how much people are spending of their income on food. This is 1960 back here.
Wow.
Yeah, we spent a lot more of our income on food in the 60s, and we're complaining. Yeah, there was a reason the women's magazines were all about how to stretch your food dollar, right? Because it was a big share of our income. And then, partly because of government subsidies and partly because of industrial food production, the costs of food have gone down. This last little glitch is COVID.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then at this point is when the minimum wage laws started to go up. So now we have almost doubled the pay going to the person who's picking, the person who's transporting, the person who's packaging, the person who's delivering, the person who's shelving, the person who's cashiering. And we're surprised the cost of food is going up. funny thing about that.
And it looks like your data stops at 2012.
No, 22.
22.
Am I reading that
That's
wrong?
22. Yeah, that's
Okay.
the COVID line there. So, yeah, there's nothing, there's the beginning of 2023 is there.
I got it. Started
Thank you.
going back up, yeah.
And that was when the wages were shifted. And my distress was the Federal Reserve said, oh, it's about interest. No, it's about the minimum wage. Can't you see this? Right? It had nothing to do with the interest rates. It had to do with who was getting paid more. And everyone at the lower end of the food processing process and all of the people at the upper end, the CEOs, were getting paid more. So here's an indication of who's spending more on food around the world. We're under the lowest. In Russia, it's pretty high, partly because of our sanctions. They're all supporting themselves. Russia doesn't get to import hardly anything because of our sanctions on Russia.
So that turned out to be a good thing for them.
It turned out to be very good for them.
Yeah.
And they're all discovering local foods, local ways to prepare them, etc. And they're actually exporting wheat a little bit, not a lot, but they're exporting it into China, which is a very hungry population, and to Africa. So,
Huh.
yeah.
And they drained the Aral Sea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Grow some of that.
Right. Yeah, they did a lot of stuff to try to make it happen. But they're starting, like wild mushrooms are now a regular part of their diet, for example. Yeah. So, yes, that's the way people are spending their money on food, which is always an indication of the quality of life. Yeah.
The color.
Yeah.
Visual.
Yeah, it really helps, doesn't it? I love them. All right, and then to look at it again in a different way, these are imports and exports. You can see how the small circle is how little we import, all right? And the big circle is how much we import. In the
Wow.
Sudan, they import a lot, all right? And this again is imports and exports, and you kind of see that. China is importing a lot.
Wow.
And of course, the desert regions import a lot, and the ones that are deserts for 6 months of the year under snow import a lot.
So is Palm Springs in there?
Well done. Right. Overall, this is how arable land is spread out around the earth. The red stuff, of course, is virtually unarable. You can't do agriculture. You can find food in those places, but it's a hunter-gathering finding food. It's not agriculture where a few people produce a lot of food for a lot of people. So the red areas, and Palm Springs is definitely there. You can see it right there.
We irrigated our.
Yeah, many of these places do irrigate, but again, not for agriculture. Yeah,
For sustenance
right,
and golf courses.
right.
Yeah. Golf course.
I knew a guy, he was a retired police chief from Whittier, and he got involved in this investment company, and they were building golf courses along the Colorado River because there's plenty of water. And I'm going, no.
Wow. We should be growing food. Wow.
I was going, please don't go there. He did finally learn. So what's interesting to me is, the bright green is generally the most effective food growing places. There's New Zealand hiding out down there.
Look at us.
Right, Brazil, and what used to be our breadbasket is not so good anymore
No.
because we've used up the water table in that irrigation. There was a huge aquifer under that land, and it ain't there anymore.
Wow.
But as we look at global warming, what we're going to see is this center belt expanding both directions. And so imagine this bright green moving northward. Imagine this red moving northward. Imagine, and so what we're going to see more and more of is, well, for example, they're growing grapes in Sweden right now.
Really?
In Sweden. Wow.
Mhm. Yep,
Jeez.
and we're going to see more of that.
And they're growing more tea in England too.
Good point. The tea gardens in England are growing. Yeah. So what was only grown in the mountainous regions here are now being grown in the hilly regions up here. So we're going to see this central area. The way I think about the planet climate change is literally the equatorial band is expanding, which means we're going to see more and more bare land down here. And Iceland has opened a new port for the things that are going around through the Bering Strait, through the Arctic Sea, down here, and now it's a main area for distribution to Europe from China.
Wow,
Iceland.
Yep,
Northwest Passage.
yep,
Whoa, wow.
That's
yep.
when, if you look at the oceans, why we're catching squid off of Oregon,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
which is down east, normally traditionally in Southern California.
Exactly. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the future and global warming. We'll be looking at more of that as we go forward. So over the last bunches of years, we've been seeing population shifts. One of them is global life expectancy is going up, not just the US. Okay, we're all going upward. And that's meaning that there will be more people functioning at these higher ages. And in the US, 60 is the new 40, 80 is the new 60. What a person was like at 60 when we were children
Right,
is what a person is like at 80 today,
that's right.
right? So the over the hill birthday party now has to happen on your 60th. So for what that's worth, and that's happening everywhere in the world.
Everywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yep. So this is the UN's estimates of the global population between 1950 and 2050. Notice the curve begins to settle out. It's no longer, remember when it was this huge steep growth
Yeah.
curve?
Yeah.
Yeah, not that anymore. And most of that was based on data from back here.
Right.
So, a lot of things have happened to slow down growth. And I think did I include that? I didn't try to set that up. There are a couple of guys who wrote a book called Empty Planet. And I'll show you some graphs based on that. But pay attention to the growing sector of people over 65, right? And this huge growing sector of people in their, quote, productive years, and this evening out of people in their childhood years. So that's part of why we're going to have slower population growth, because these people aren't going to be having babies. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that similar to what happened like with our generation in the 70s? And how our generation had a lot less children
Than the
after our
previous
parents.
generation. Right.
So it's like a cycle.
That's part of it. The access to birth control is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And consciousness too.
I think so.
Well, I like to think a little bit.
Right. So that's where I want to talk about with this. This was the UN's projection, and it's now totally trashed. So don't try to remember any of the numbers. We're about half of it for North America. We're about half of it, about 2/3 of it for Latin and South America. Africa is only going to be about half of that.
And for
Asia,
projection.
and this is population increase. Population increase. Oceania is going to stay about where it is. Asia is going to stay about where it is. What's going on here? It'll be a little less in Asia because of what's happening in India and Southeast Asia. But Africa and Southeast Asia are in this marvelous place of women discovering what women in the US did in the 70s.
In the 70s, yeah.
In North America,
Yeah.
not just the US, right?
Do we
And-
have options?
We have options, and also we have education. See that red thing on the table over there next to Deanna's cup? That is the reason.
The iPhone.
Yes, the smartphone. Every woman in Africa and almost every man in Africa now has a smartphone. They have to, I'll show you why in a bit, but that gives them access to so much more than why they have to have it, right? And in India, these guys that wrote this book, Empty Planet, are saying that by 2050, it's going to start curving down. and it's not going to be stoppable. Okay, the population of the world. So we may get up to 10 something billion, maybe. And then we'll be back at 7 billion, and then 3 billion, and then 2 billion. They're figuring it's going to end up at the carrying capacity of about 2 billion people.
But that's good news.
I love it.
That's good.
We gotta make a big
Vision
change.
where there wasn't any before, because it was a flat screen. If you didn't have the dimension of the phone.
Right, that they didn't have any way to do anything. They
Yeah.
did not have
Yeah.
access
Yeah.
to knowledge. They were
And they
kept
also didn't know
barefoot
what
and pregnant
things
in the
looked
dirt.
like.
Right,
Yeah.
and now they have access to knowledge. So these guys are doing interviews of focus groups around the country, around the world. And they would go primarily to low-income groups. And in the slums of Delhi, right? They're talking with these women who are arranged marriages. They're living in their in-laws' households. That's how you do it in India, right? You move from your home into the husband's home. Now your mother-in-law is your mentor, okay? And you are to be in bhakti yoga, that is total devotion to this family. And they are ideally doing the same for you. And these women have been being told, you're here, so we have grandchildren.
Right.
And these women are going, well, my in-laws would really like me to have 5 or 6, but I think I'm going to stop at 2 or 3. And the guys are going, wow, that's kind of cool. And they don't really know why. And the focus group is over after an hour or so. And all these slum women who only own one sari and are dressed up for this meeting, at the appointed time, the meeting is over, and all of their do not disturbs get turned back off, and their saris start glowing with the messages that they have been receiving during this meeting. They have smartphones. They are no longer barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, right? That's going to be the major contributor to the reduction in those numbers. In Europe, it'll probably stay a negative number, but unless immigration refugees, climate refugees, turns that around.
A bad joke, but does Steve Jobs wear a halo over there?
There's no economic model for reduced population growth. All the economies of modern times are based on producing and selling more goods to ever growing number of people.
Right,
So there's no idea what that's going to look like.
right.
The population growth is slowing down and going to come to a stop. How does this consumer growth-based economy respond? No blueprint, no ideas, no nothing.
And that's what I'm here for.
But we gotta figure out anyway, because this is not an inexhaustible planet.
Exactly.
You're gonna hit resource line, that population line is gonna hit a resource line.
We're going to run out of consumers. It's because the consumer growth is what jobs and everything else are based on. There's going to be more people to consume. Well, it's not going to happen.
That's why I'm here to talk about the world we are creating. That's right.
Carry on.
Right. So you might want to know that in Ashland, there's a group that's called the No Growth Institute.
Oh, yeah.
And they're marvelous. They have, they're all over. They have the Institute, they have blogs, they have newsletters. They are very, very good. And they can help explain a lot of that. So the current population projections, here's that UN projection that we had that in 2050 was slowing down, but it's still increasing to 2100. Not so likely. This is now the UN projection.
Wow.
All right.
That should be.
And other projections are as low as this, right? Over the next 50, 60, 80 years.
Oh.
So, yeah, that then the blue line is today. We're watching migration shift. Okay, this is negative migration. People are leaving. This is positive. People are moving there. And that's appropriate because this is the band that's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter and harder and harder to live in. And we're going to see more and more people moving to northern and
So
southern.
you're saying climate is a big.
Huge.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's happening in India is they're learning how to restore the water resources so the monsoon rains don't just run off into the ocean.
Mm.
And we'll talk about that. And they're doing more of that in Africa
See
too.
that line there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which
It's
might,
pretty demonstrative.
Yeah. yeah, it is. It really is. yeah.
Like the blue is too.
Mhm. All right, so now we're talking about urbanization. All right, so the numbers are here to about 2015. I don't have new numbers on this one yet. It'll be a 10-year thing, so we'll get 2025 numbers. But you can see up until recently, everybody's been moving into cities. This projection is also wrong because with climate change, a lot of those cities are becoming uninhabitable. So we're starting actually to see people leaving cities. They're leaving the larger cities on the coast. They're leaving the larger cities in that band, and they're moving into more small towns and rural areas. So let's get to the climate change. Yes. This is the current numbers from the satellite. This is from 1950 to now. So it's an interesting rainbow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's elevating. It's an interesting bell curve.
Well, this is this is what our monthly temperatures look like, right?
Oh,
Okay, it's normally
But we're
cold in
going up,
January
we're
and
not
December. It's
staying
normally
the same
hotter in July, but the numbers keep getting higher and higher, beyond anything anyone else has done. In the past, you'd see some ups and downs,
yes.
but now we're not seeing so many ups and downs into the lower temperature ranges. So
Huh.
we will see an increase in climate refugees, people who cannot live where they have been living, and they will move to the north and south. That's just part of what we've got going here. Now, the question is, this is October of 2023, by the way. The question is, can we turn this around? Can we find other ways to make it work? And hopefully we can. Is again another way to look at the mean temperatures. This is the 8 years, the past 8 years. This is 1860. And so these are all different organizations measuring the temperatures. Most of them are colleges and universities. A couple of them are government agencies. So they're taking the average temperature at that point in history. And you can see as we get further along, we get more and more agencies involved. But yeah, it's pretty high right now.
What was happening in 1880 that
All right, I think this is fascinating. This era here is pre-steam engine, right? My great grandmother sailed around the world prior to 1880. And in 1950, she flew around the world in an airplane. My grandmother sailed to India in a steamship right here.
Cool.
Right. The burning of coal, the burning of wood, the burning of oil as they began to, and whale oil and gas oil. That's what's doing this. Everything prior to that was purely whatever the world was doing.
That time.
Yeah, volcanoes and what other stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that's happening, I don't know if you're aware of the fracking caused earthquakes all over, is opening up some magma faults. So I don't know where that's going to go.
Wow.
Yep. This is the $1 billion storms in the US. The 80s and the 90s and the early aughts and 2022.
Weather in general, Ruth, or like hurricanes, tornadoes?
A
or
storm
all of
that
the above?
cost $1 billion.
Okay.
A storm.
Wow.
One storm cost
Wow.
$1 billion. There were over 12 of them in 2020.
Wow.
Be it flooding or wind or.
Yeah.
All of the costs
Whatever,
from the
yeah.
storm of, so, yeah. And that, so, yes.
And that has to do also with where people choose to live.
Some of it is, there's more damage if you got more population in a
Like those of
hurricane
us
belt.
that want to live on the ocean, for whatever reason.
Hurricane.
Yeah.
That's part of it in the hurricane region. The other part of it is the expense of building in anywhere now has gone way up.
Yeah.
So that's part of what's going on there too. In 1995, I was talking to a real estate management investment company. I was going, you need to stop building your buildings for insurance companies because they aren't going to be able to afford to be there in 20 years.
There you go.
Yeah, they didn't
And they
believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one small area. This is a national park in the mid-Atlantic region. Okay. And this is them tracking temperatures from 18 something to 20 something and precipitation. So this is their temperature ranges and this is their precipitation ranges. So not only are we getting more expensive storms, we're getting more storms.
Wow.
Yeah. So at least in that part of the country. At the same time, again, these were measurements by, at all the different ports around the world, the low tide and the high tide, and then this is the average. And then they introduced satellite monitoring of the height of the sea back in the 1993. So you can see that the tides are going higher and higher. And here in Waldport, I got here in 99, started coming down here and almost never saw water on the seawall. But now every high tide is at the seawall.
Onto the road.
And
Yeah.
in stormy weather, it's on the
Yeah.
road. Yeah. So we can see it right here.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm intrigued that the satellite doesn't get exactly the measurements that the people who are measuring it at the docks are getting. But I think that's just a function of the computer. I think someone wrote the program wrong.
Or being too general.
Okay. This is what's happening now as rising sea levels are happening. The red zones are areas that are getting flooded by seawater at least once in a year right now.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is what'll happen if all of the ice on the planet is melted. Okay. That's probably not going to happen.
Where's Florida?
Yeah.
It's underwater.
Yeah. Yeah. If all the glaciers, all the icebergs, all of those things melt, this is what we got, including that little island of hills right in the middle. It isn't even going to be an island, right? And, most of that built up area in Mexico that was, built for tourists, and New Orleans is underwater. Notice that the Gulf goes all the way up into Arkansas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see a little bit on the coast. You can see here, I'm going to go one more level. I took that area.
Hey, Ruth,
Yeah.
can we turn these lights down?
The front ones is the first one, or the back ones is the back one.
You guys tell me if you're miserable.
No, it's better.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you, DK.
You're welcome.
So I blew up this section of the map here. So San Francisco, the bay floods into the whole Sacramento Valley.
Wow, the Delta.
Gone.
Yeah.
It continues, it goes down to Salinas, it goes up to Point Reyes. So that's the San Francisco
This is an
area.
estimate.
This is Half Moon Bay. This is if all of the ice on the planet melts.
Okay.
Look at the
Okay.
Willamette Valley.
This is cool to me, yeah. So the
Wow.
Columbia flows back into the Willamette. So we have a salt lake in the
Wow.
Willamette. Right. And the Puget Sound, the sound expands. Mount Rainier becomes the edge of the sound. Right. So, yeah, the light line is what is currently land,
Yeah.
right?
And all the Pacific Islands are underwater.
In that one, right? Yeah. Yeah, we can't really tell with this map, but yes, if these are underwater, they are. And some of them already are,
Very close.
right? And that's why, you can see here. If
Yeah.
at least some point of the year, they are underwater. So we're probably not going to see all of the ice melt, but we might. We may have some glaciers on some mountains, but right now, all the indications are that the Arctic is melting and the Antarctic is melting and the icebergs are breaking off and they are melting. So some significant part of this, New York's underwater, Boston's underwater, Philadelphia's underwater, DC's
No more
underwater.
Florida.
And no more, yeah.
What are we talking in years there? Like, how many years?
We don't know. Yeah, for the last 10 years, I've been being very frustrated because they've been offering these estimates that are clearly wrong.
Yeah.
They've been pushing it out there as if it's sometime in the future.
It's happening.
When it's happening right now, right? So if this were going to happen by 2050, this will be the same. Okay, if it's not going to happen, then it's not going to happen, right? But we can pretty much just accept that 70 to 80% of the ice on the planet today will not be on the planet. So figure 70 to 80% of this will happen.
The glaciers. I saw a map in the 70s that somebody had.
Well, yeah, that was actually from someone's nightmares.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was a prophet. And he was seeing this area from New Orleans all the way.
The whole Mississippi.
Yeah, the whole
Yeah.
Mississippi.
Yeah.
So I was doing classes at that time. People would call me up and say, tell me, is this real? Is this real?
Right.
And there were two things. There were two big things. One was that the continent was going to be broken up and it was all going to be water there. And the other was that the San Andreas fault would, cause this huge disruption in the world, right?
Yeah,
Earth changes,
yeah.
right? So
As
in
it did once before.
right. In 1991, 93, 94, the Mississippi Valley flooded all the way to the Missouri. And if you had taken a photograph, it would have looked like that guy's map.
Wow.
And he said 93.
Oh.
It was only 10 inches deep,
Yeah.
But
But
it connected.
but it was what flooded the whole way.
Oh.
Right. And I
So
saw
the
that.
indication was there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he heard in his mind, this was this catastrophic, the whole world is changing
Yeah.
rather than it's a big flood. Right.
yeah.
The ebb and flow.
Right. And those people got smart. They stopped building on that floodplain.
Wow.
And so when I was driving back and forth across country, 2012, 2013, 2014, this is when I was learning how they were reacting to those floods, right? So all the way up to the Missouri, it was backing up into the Missouri. So it looked like that picture.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the other thing is this thing about the San Andreas Fault. I have lived along the San Andreas Fault most of my life, except for my time in Oregon. So it's basically a straight line right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in 70, 72, I was living at the southern end. In 73 to 76, I was living in the Bay Area. And again, in the 80s, I was living in the Bay Area. And, some interesting things happened on the San Andreas Fault. There were two businesses happening in garages right on the fault.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was called Apple, and the other one was called Hewlett Packard. They have completely changed the world.
Yeah.
It was an earth-changing event on the San Andreas Fault.
Literally.
Living on the fault line, we call it.
So a lot of the prophecy is going to come in the form of symbols, and we interpret the symbols how we will, right? And I was able to say that in the late 80s, early 90s. Actually, it was 93 that was the last group that's going, and they got it. And I was a futurist on the San Andreas Fault in the 70s, and nobody predicted the personal computer. It was in two pieces of science fiction written in the 40s, and that's it. Isn't that amazing?
That is.
Yeah. So earth-changing events right there on the San Andreas.
I never thought about it because we lived on the fault our whole life in Point Reyes.
Mhm.
And
That
I never
nice
thought
straight
about
line
it that
right through
way
there.
psychically.
Yeah.
Cosmically.
Yeah,
Energetically.
absolutely.
Geographically.
Absolutely. And the great that Jefferson Airplane in Bolinas, right?
Yeah,
Right there on this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
right
all
there
kinds
on
of
fault.
In Palm Springs.
Is it on the same fault line?
Yeah.
Long Beach is on the fault line. How come, there must be a branch in it.
Yep, there's a branch.
I got you.
That's like, but that's the salt aspect of it. Palm Springs, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That, I haven't tracked the deserts of California at all. So you'll notice there hasn't been a whole lot of change on the coastline. That's because we're bluffs. We're not beaches. So a lot of the bluff homes are going to be gone, just as they are in Malibu right now, right? They're falling away as the bluff is eaten. And, you know, that one house in Glen Eden Beach, when the current changed, this place that had never been built on for a reason, lost its, its support on the bluff. So they built a house on it, and the next year they lost it.
I'm amazed, coming back to Walport,
Uh-huh,
down there in the Bayshore,
yeah,
that is a cliff now.
yeah.
Getting to the beach is like.
Uh-huh, it is,
On the south side of the bay.
yeah.
The southern part, where when you go, you're talking about the south side of the bay.
Behind the
You walk-
swimming pool.
Yeah, you walk, yeah. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I drive down to Florence, you know, a couple times a month, and the you can see the dunes being eroded
Yeah.
as you come over the bluff at the end of the cape there. Yep, it's happening, and there, you know, this was where the Columbia turns into the Willamette right there, but if you come here, this is Tillamook. Tillamook's
my
been
goodness.
underwater forever, you know, and it's gonna be even more underwater.
Well, Debbie and I were just walking the dogs the other day and,
Yeah.
up at Idaho Street.
Mhm.
And there used to be, right next to Katie Kane's place, there was a little place that, when she lived there years ago, that you could just walk right down to the beach.
Mhm.
There was no trail down to the beach anymore, other
Slide.
than the one that my friend built.
Over here at Wakanda, there isn't any way to get there anymore.
I wasn't sure. I mean, it just was a drop off.
Right, so we are seeing the shifts. We are seeing them now. And they haven't caused huge amounts of damage, but I have some friends who live on Wakanda, right up the road from Wakanda Road. Guess what their annual insurance is?
Hmm,
3,000 a month.
a month.
Holy,
Sorry.
I know.
I can't use that word in vain.
That's okay. Yeah, 3,000 a month for house insurance down at Wakanda.
I mean, people are leaving Florida not only because they're tired of the storms, but because they either can't get insurance on their homes or they can't afford insurance on their
Right.
homes.
And keep in mind that insurance companies are the biggest players on Wall Street.
yeah, I was gonna
Insurance
say,
companies and
No.
pension plans, they're the ones who make the stock market do what it does. So as they shift and change, then what's happening on the stock market shifts and change. So that's all tied together. It can't be separated. You know, we'd love to be able to separate it all out, but it's all tied together. Okay, so this is, we talked about soil before. This is water now. Where is their water? This is interesting. The good soil for growing things in Australia has a scarcity of water. So there's a lot of work being done there. Same thing in India. The best soil is where there's less water. So they're starting to work with water issues. Yeah, you can see part of why China has to import so much food. We know about what's going on in here. And this actually overlaps with part of Russia in here having water issues. So this thing, the green economic water scarcity, the resources are abundant relative to use. Most of Africa.
wow.
And there's a lot of reasons for it, but the best I've been able to find is the infrastructure that was built up by the colonial powers was allowed to deteriorate by the dictators that followed, you know, by the money grabbers. And so there is no process for the water that is actually there to be used by the people. They have to walk and whatever. So a lot of new companies are forming to address that. We're going to talk about that. Population changes. I used to have a map up here that showed that everyone was moving to the dry areas of the country prior to 2020. That was normal. Everyone was moving to the Sun Belt, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? They're not doing that anymore.
No.
What they're doing is they're following the low taxes They're moving to the states with the lowest taxes.
Yeah, that is true.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so what that tells me is that the media is what's driving what's going on in the world, right, in this country right now.
But those, I have a question. So the states with those lower taxes, how is the infrastructure in those states?
Yeah, right. Now, Texas is interesting because it's county by county. They have almost no state infrastructure. And so it really depends, what county are you in, right? I don't know these other states at all. You know, they are what they are, you know. I
And they're
lived
not
in-
terribly populated. Well, those northern states aren't.
Yeah,
I
these
don't know
are.
them, Yeah.
I anticipate that the people who are moving there now will be gone within 5 years.
They'll relocate somewhere else.
Yeah, because they can't handle the weather.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
But with global warming, there won't be quite such intense winters. Yes, Rob?
you think about who moves to a state with lower taxes? People with money. As the wealthy are fleeing paying those taxes. So these are people of means, wealthier retirees, stuff. That's who's going.
That's some of it. The other piece is that these are also known to be states without so much infrastructure. So people who are seeking to get away from government
Yeah.
are going to these states as well. Yeah, as well.
Florida's going.
So, yeah. So the red ones are where people are leaving. And this was by millions, and I don't have the numbers on there. This was before this. This is the most current. All right, so with all of those things going on, nonetheless, some amazing things are
Yeah,
happening.
give us some good news.
Yeah, no, that didn't feel like bad news.
No.
No, it's not bad,
It was tempered.
but.
Okay, so the UN back in the 90s created these 17 indicators of a sustainable ecological economic system, okay? And, you know, in our world, that's a nation state, 17 different ones. And, you know, clearly they're divided in 3 clusters. There's the ones that have to do with the ecology. There's the ones that have to do with the economy. And there's the ones that have to do with the society. Notice what they pay attention to. Gender inequality. Where the 2 genders are unequal, it's less sustainable. Population in multidimensional poverty. How many, we looked at those numbers going down. So that's what they're looking at. They want those numbers that we looked at before to go down. And the old age dependency ratio, that is how many people over 65 can be independent. Isn't that interesting? Those are their social indicators for sustainable economic ecological.
Is this why we have to answer all these additional questions if we have a medical appointment now?
Probably.
No, that's your insurance
I think
company.
that's all that's it.
Well, I can't tie it to insurance. It's like, do you live alone? Does anyone stop in to see you? Or, what are your social connections? And all
Well,
of that.
right. So part of that is they.
After COVID.
Yeah.
So part of that is they know that healthy people have social connections. So you will not be dependent on this medical service nearly so much if you've got good social connections. And that's a huge part of what that's about.
Well, I had that same kind of.
Another
phone call,
image of the same goals.
And they asked me if I could afford to buy my food.
Yeah.
And I actually said, I'm not answering these questions, it has nothing to do with my insurance. And I hung up because I didn't want to give them the data.
I understand. But literally, they are saying if you've got these qualities in your life, you will be healthier and you won't cost us so much.
Well, I don't need them to know.
I got it.
No, I get it.
Got it.
They're just being
So
difficult.
for a virtually illiterate world, this is the shorthand version of all those things, of all those goals. And, so people are using these graphics as indicators of where they are at. Where are we? This was 2010, where people were, the different countries were in terms of those 17 goals. This is 2023.
Wow.
We are down to number 35.
Wow.
We are not being sustainable.
That's pretty evident. We can't even deal with our own recycling.
We never have.
No.
We've always shifted up.
It's like, it's kind of like at the base of,
Right. In 2013, we were shipping all of our recycling to other countries, up to 2013. China warned us in 2013 that they would be cutting all countries off in 2018. And they did, but we didn't do anything to build up an infrastructure in that 5-year period. So now we can't recycle many of the things that we were recycling.
So as we have slipped to 35th
Uh-huh.
from 10th, what have the other countries who are coming in above us doing on the positive side to
Love
move
it.
them that high?
Okay. In Denmark and Sweden, they're recycling everything and they are no longer using plastics in their grocery chain at all. And in France, they are saying you have to bring your own packaging to buy anything, food wise. They're not offering packaging of any kind. And they have a law that says if there's any leftovers at the grocery store, it has to go to a nonprofit. It can't be thrown away.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and you can do that by county by county. You can do that. Austria and Germany shifted into a building norm that we would call LEEDs today, where everything is an energy efficient building. And they have roadways lined with solar collectors. They have glass that is solar collectors on their building. All of that. They have eliminated not nuclear power plants, in those countries. There's someone trying to build one in Germany right now. I don't know where that's going to go.
Why did Norway drop?
Norway, right, had been the leader. One of the things we need to understand is Denmark, Sweden, and Norway are always in our world the first ones to implement something. And Norway had some problems with resources, and so they stopped adding more implementation while these other guys were coming in with more implementation. The Netherlands rebuilt their old-fashioned windmills because they saw global warming, meaning higher seas. So they have all of their train system on their windmills, which are also their pumps to keep the water out of their farmlands.
Awesome.
Right? So those are some of the things that I've been watching, as they go up. Go along. And, the Korean Republic has completely changed their building codes, and Japan is, they're all doing more and more things than we are. Canada has done much more than we have in all of these areas. So I'm delighted they are moving up. I'm really sad that we're continuing to show up as not being leaders. Then there's this other thing. Those are the governments, nation states, but this is one scan that I just pasted together on Google of non-government organizations focused on sustainability. And it just kept on going and going and going. There are thousands of them now that are not government agencies. One of them is EcoWatch. They see things like this and tell people about them and work with whatever agencies they can to stop it, reverse it, etc. Another one is this company that I can't read right now. I think it's Synergy. And they're working with people on local materials for local housing structures that meet the local climate norms, so that you are not building something that doesn't belong where you're building it. Right? Yeah, exactly. Okay, high tech, part of what's been going on that is actually contributing, as I said, with the women with their smartphones, is the presence of internet everywhere, right? Except for certain parts of Africa, but they are using cell phone connections, not internet connections. So a cell phone is a necessity in Africa right now, using cell towers rather than trying to be on the internet. And this is why. Mobile phones. So this guy.
This is what, just FYI, this is what we do when our power's out, right?
Yeah, we go to our cell
We
tower,
go to our cell phone. Okay.
right, yeah,
So the
or our landline.
towers are still the
In most cases, they are.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah, in most cases they are, exactly. So this is why they use the cell phone, right? And this is interesting. This is 2008. Yeah, so between 1998 and 2008, which was an object of luxury and privilege, has become a basic necessity
Wow.
in Africa,
like water.
right? Yeah, exactly. And in some cases, it's about, it's the only way you're going to get the water.
Yeah.
And one of the ways they use the cell phones, this is so cool. Little stores, straight front booths, right? Have started working. This is a Swahili finance group. The mobile banking service transformed it. It operates in Kenya, Tanzania. It works in more and more countries now. People make small monetary transactions through text messages, SMS messages, right? Circumventing the need for a formal bank account, Venmo and Zelle and all of that, right? They're just doing it between the phone. Then they take the phone to the company, to one of these booths, and the QR code, they get money. They get the money that's on the phone, on the M-Pesa system.
Wow.
So cash is unnecessary. They can pay with the phone, or they can get the money for those situations where they do. So people who couldn't do anything in the money economy are now participating in the money economy. There's ups and downs to that, but as you're transitioning out of the negative economy that was the result of the colonial powers moving out and everything falling apart into something that could become a sustainable economy, the money stage is useful. It's not a long-term solution.
Is that because it's more direct and there's less middlemen?
Part of it is, there aren't as many people in the middle, but it's also, small amounts might be 50 cents, right? 25 cents.
Right.
And that's a whole different world of exchange.
And then we're,
You have a $1.50 ATM fee if you're not using your own bank. You're not gonna take 25 cents out.
That's right. You got it. Okay, this is a city designed by an American for the government of China. China said, this is a valley. They gave him a satellite photo. We want a city built there where you cannot see it. You can just see, the valley as it was. So what did he do? He created a green city, right? They already had in China the commitment to building closed system buildings. Okay, where the water is recycled and growing plants that are feeding people, that are going back into the fertilizing system, that is air conditioning the building, that is da.
So it's all like when we recycle air in our cars.
Only more so. Only more so.
Everything.
Think of a spaceship.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's like a spaceship.
Wow.
So they also were familiar with something that some of you Arizonans know about, Paulo Soleri's arcologies. And he was saying you build something that has most of everybody's needs on it, that you can have 1,000 or 100,000 people in one spot, that lets you have open space around it. And that's what arcology is.
Biodiversity.
And biodiversity also. So there's biodiversity in the buildings and around them. And this is the direction that China was going. It's one of their experimental cities. Now, one of the differences between China and the US is the US has one person in Congress, Senate and House that has any scientific training, and that person is an MD. China's Politburo, Congress, has 80% people trained in science, technology, and engineering.
Wow. Little different. So it's not just political, it's academic.
It's also engineering.
Yeah.
And they understand global warming, and they understand closed system design, and they understand all of this.
Not a political appointment.
Exactly.
You got 50% of the residents of this country don't believe in engineering, think it's all fake.
And yet look what they're using all the time, right?
Yeah. This chair was engineered.
Yes, sir.
When was that? Oh,
It's only about 5 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing that they got somebody from the United States to design it.
Yeah, I think his name is William McHenry. I'd have to double check that. I have the video where he's describing the process.
When you put that slide up, I thought, where have I seen this before? Now, it doesn't have the technology inside. That is how the warehouse or headquarters built in the sixties.
Yes,
Auburn is built.
I love that building. I love that building, yes.
Like this. The
Yeah.
Americans had the architectural idea.
We threw it away.
About 50 years.
All right, some of you know where this is.
Everything's for sale.
Yeah, some of you know where this is, yes? Dubai,
Yeah.
okay. All of those buildings are closed system. All of the pedestrian walkways are underneath.
Wow.
So no one has to be outside in the heat.
Wow.
And most of the transportation is by this system, and it's all solar powered. Surprise, surprise. Dubai.
It's just
Um,
a version of Las
and the Red
Vegas, but
Sea.
the same like oil.
Yeah. So this is another approach. And the guy who is saying he wants to build a smart city in Arizona, this is what he's looking at as his model. He wants to build a city that is, an engineered city designed to make it so humans can be comfortable and the planet can have the least possible impact on it.
When we lived in Phoenix, and this was in the early eighties, we wanted to build a house underground. And
Yeah.
there was one place that we could see and talk to the guy about doing it, where they planted,
Berm.
3 feet underground, and yet it was light and it was the same temperature year round.
Yep.
Just 36
That's New
inches down.
Mexico, that's right. So, yeah, there are a few still in Arizona, but when I've tried to do that in any given county, I'm always given, well, you need a structural engineer and you need to have all of this and all, and they're adding on the order of $200,000 to the cost of building something that, the cave people were able to build. In the Pueblo. Yeah, and the basket makers of the Pueblo period, that's who we're talking about, yeah.
Well, and there's the earthship homes that are.
Well, and
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
she was asking about.
Right.
So that the earthship homes are built out of tires, recycled tires,
Yeah.
rammed earth structures. And they are closed systems. They have a greenhouse, they have their own water systems, and they do pretty well. I've got a couple examples.
And they're still around.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, have been for 50 years. Funny thing about that, yeah. All right, so some places are encouraging what I'm calling smart suburbs, solar collectors, cars outside of the residential area, food growing in the residential area. This is in Europe, this is in the States, what can you say? And then there are smart houses. This is a smart house in Mongolia. It's a yurt. It's insulated, well insulated. There are rugs all over inside. It's got a solar panel. It's got a satellite dish. It folds up and goes on the back of the motorcycle, and they take it somewhere else when they want it. The smart house in Mongolia.
They're incredible.
Right. Talk about light on the planet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And snuggly.
Yeah, that too. Right. This is the commercialized smart house. You have connectors and all these different places to turn on and turn off and make the right temperature and you can sit at your desk at your office and tell your house what to do. And here's some of the connectors on the commercialized smart house. This is Elon Musk's smart house. It is built with recycled materials. The roof is a solar collector. The driveway is a solar collector. The Tesla car is living on the Tesla battery, right? All of the electrical is provided through the solar collectors. It has a recycled water system. These are food beds potentially that are the water system getting clarified, then turned back into the system. And this could be built anywhere on the planet. It's designed so the south side is here, so you're maximizing your winter, or unless you're in New Mexico, in which case this is your north side. In the southern states, you want this to be your north side. But up here, you definitely want it to be your south side. And notice that the sun is setting off in the distance over here, and that's totally appropriate. So this is a smart house by Elon Musk standards. It is fully self-contained and beautiful. Then we get smart vehicles. This is a drone airport. in Rwanda. They are delivering medical supplies and food by drones. So they build these. I think it's marvelous.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and then people are walking in and walking out.
I gave up the sunroof in my car and I have a solar panel on the entire roof and it charges my hybrid battery.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Right on. And that's, that's the kind of thing we're going to see more of in all of these things. Then there is a different way of farming. I'm calling it smart farming. This is high-tech approaches or engineered approaches to farming. This guy is saying what we need to do is figure out where on the planet strawberries grow best, where on the planet wheat grows best, and then just shipping around to different places. So yeah, he's assuming we're going to continue to be transporting food 3,000-4,000 miles. And he's saying that's the most efficient way we could be farming on the planet. And I like the whole system's design. I just don't like spending that much time and energy in transport.
Yeah.
Remember,
It would be a shame if we ate strawberry season.
I know, except we can have a strawberry season. Hollister strawberries are beginning in December in Hollister, California. They've got them, and they can go all the way through October if you've got a proper place up here.
Yeah.
So you can have strawberries a lot of the year. All right, in Kenya, you use the phone, the cell phone, right? They don't even have to have the internet. It's We Farm Now is a cell net. The guy says, I'm trying to plant my onions. How deep do I do? Right? I've got these rabbits in my yard. What do I do? He just puts it into the We Farm Now network and he gets cell phone replies. And that's happening all over Africa now. So people are starting to produce their own food, even though they were totally ignorant about how it used to be, right, in the past. And so I love that high-tech approach. And we're seeing that with the YouTubes in this country, with people who have internet. Almost anything you want to know how to do, you can find a YouTube. It's just amazing. This little thing is smart farming because it's part of a permaculture design. Permaculture is huge in my mind. It is the only way humanity is going to survive if we're all doing permaculture. So if I understand or I have an analysis that shows me how the wind moves down this hill and how the water flows down this hill, then I can plan my plantings and my home siting, and I can build berms and I can do other things that maximize my comfort level in my home and the resources going to my orchards and my wood lots. And this is a 5-acre plot right there.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, you can have everything you need on a 2-acre plot, but you can
Spread out.
Right. You can have a wood lot and other things. So
Wow.
yeah, we'll talk more about that. More smart farming stuff. University of California at Santa Cruz has found that they can use transparent pink solar collectors on a greenhouse and get longer growing times in their greenhouses. Who knew? Pink.
I think there had to be a reason for pink.
There you go. This is an old photo. This is about 20 years old now. St. Paul, a brewery, closed down. Some people moved in some aquatic gardening in there, and they're supplying greens to all the restaurants in town.
Wow.
Yeah. This is a device developed by a student at MIT. He's created a box that can be put in junior high school classes, and they can do experiments. How much this chemical and that chemical, this nutrient and that nutrient, how much light, how much not light, to grow their own lettuces that then they can eat in their school cafeteria. So that's the experimental version. This is the MIT cafeteria version.
Wow.
They're using the same technology, monitoring the appropriate nutrients and light and flow, and it's all done by the computer based on the inputs. They've got little sensors in each of these cups, right? And little sensors in each of these cups, and they are growing greens year-round with no significant increase in electrical use or water use. I love it.
I have 3 of those tower gardens
Good,
by Juice Plus.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. If you'll let us watch this.
Didn't Elon Musk's brother get into this indoor growing thing? It's
Yeah, and if you're involved in MIT, you're involved in this, right? And, indoor growing is a huge part of what happens when you have global climate change, right? Because you're going to be needing to provide your own food as much as possible. This is a video that apparently isn't going to come up, so I'm going to have to walk you through it. All of that is erosion on what used to be a forested peninsula. It's a little scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Where?
that's in New Zealand. This is a guy in Virginia. He's doing a TED talk on eco landscaping. Thomas Woltz. I strongly recommend the TED talk. I apologize that the video isn't working. I had it set up, but it didn't work. So eco landscaping, Thomas Woltz. It's an old video now. It's almost, wow, it's close to 10 years old. But he talks about coming in with the bioengineering mindset to recreate habitat and recreate the landscape as it was while still producing food sources, crops. Okay. So you can just barely see up there. There's a little kind of an inlet down there, and it had turned into, they'd just infilled some marshlands. So one of the things they did is they carved out basically a river with ponds in it in the infilled marshlands there. They planted close to 1 million cabbage palms. If you've been seeing these funny palm trees like that on the stem, I've got 2 at my place. These are called cabbage palms. They're the native New Zealand tree. And so they worked out a deal with the Maori, and the Maori raised the seedlings, and then they worked with the Maori to plant and restore 3,000 acres of eroded land that the sheep had been allowed to destroy, basically. And they were able to create several hundred acres for sheep in the same process that was healthy for everyone. And they restored a citrus orchard, and they used natural processes to protect that, etc. So it's a marvelous video. He opens with what he did in Virginia to help restore a more traditional landscape there. So I strongly recommend it. Okay, water. I mentioned water. This is what's happening out in the ocean to filter out the garbage. That was designed by an 18-year-old kid.
Yes.
I love that.
know.
I love that. And he has managed to eliminate over 10%. I think it's now 20% of this France-sized island of garbage out in the Pacific Ocean.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We were just
Yeah,
talking about
he's
that.
just amazing. Just amazing.
How is he doing that?
I don't know. I haven't checked on the technology lately, but at the time it was basically a siphon. And the siphon, draws the water to this thing that then filters out the water and pulls the garbage into this thing. And then
Big garbage disposal.
it's like a big garbage
And
disposal,
there's a
right?
big boom, that boom's catching it.
Right.
With
Yeah.
the wind.
Right. And it's almost totally self-contained. This is a solar collector up here. And so it's just been beautiful to watch the difference that he has made with his work. And he got a lot of funding. He did a kind of a GoFundMe kind of a thing. And he got it. So when he turned 21, he started doing the work. I love it.
Wow.
Yeah. If you don't have one of these kinds of things, I recommend it. Life Straw. Filters 264 gallons of water all by itself. All right. And if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you got to have water and you can't boil it, that's a useful thing to have in the car. This is a desalination plant, which is part of how we're trying to get fresh water, right? What happens to the salt we're taking out of the salt ocean? They're saving the pure water, but what happens to the salt? Are they dumping it right back in? Are they changing the salinity of the ocean? Well, if they're changing the salinity of the ocean, is that something we want to see? So these large scale desalination plants are going to be causing great problems as we go forward. This is a large scale water treatment plant in the UK. And this is one of the things they did to get higher up on the scale. This is all solar powered. And it's huge. It is absolutely huge. And I don't have a way to scale it, but those are like 2 4-lane roads around the edges.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's always about the refuse.
Yeah. Yeah. In humanity, it's always been.
Yeah.
If I'm an archaeologist, where I'm going to go? I'm going to the garbage dump because that's what we do. Here's using the life straw to be able to have clean water. This is another approach, does the same thing. It just floats. It's got little solar cells in the bottom. And so you can just, lap water like a puppy and notice the difference between the water it's sitting in and the water that's inside it.
Wow.
Yeah. This is someone else. This is a gal here in the States. She figured out you can do the same thing. You can use the sun to clarify the water. And so this is a system where the water goes in and it comes out clear.
That's what we did at the environmental school that Chuck and I were working at, that's what we would teach the kids.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the same kind of thing, only it's using basically the sun heats the water, it condenses. Yeah. So the yucky water condenses up here, and what's condensing isn't yucky. What's condensing is pure. So the top part is pure water and the bottom is yucky water. And this is the kind of filter that they're handing out all over Africa. This is an African home. And it's basically corn flour. But they're using that as a filter. There's charcoal and corn flour.
Wow.
Yeah. Just put water in it and try to get something. You get cleaner water out of it.
So Ruth, that's the side of a building?
Yep.
And that's a big thing on the side of the building.
Well,
it's not like this big. It's like
3 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. 20 inches to 3 feet.
Yeah.
The only catch there, you gotta have some kind of water.
Well, and they do. They walk a mile, they get a bucket full of water, they walk back.
Mucky water, but at least there's water.
Exactly. Okay, so this is fun. This is 3D printing has made a huge difference. In our country, we talk about 3D printing, make it possible to build a gun or to go into space and create the tools you need in space. Here, they're using 3D printing to take their old recycled plastic that we have sent over there and turn them into useful things. So this simple thing, I'm sorry about that black stripe across the top. Can you see that this is a soap pump here on this thing with the water? This person is pushing on the soap. Whoop, come back. There we go. This person is pushing on this lever that was made with the 3D printer, one of those things, and the soap is coming out. So they're not handling bars of soap, but they are getting some means to clean their hands. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that they're doing with 3D printing, all kinds of things with 3D printing. And this is my favorite. Based on this design here, they've created these wheel-shaped things. That's a water container.
Yep.
She no longer has to bring several gallons of water on her head.
Whoa.
Isn't that cool?
And it's almost like inventing the wheel. You
Yeah.
wonder, like, what took so long?
Right, exactly.
Wow.
This is what having a 3D printer will do. And there's one for sale on Craigslist right now if you want to get it. They're anywhere from $200 to $1,000.
Whoa.
All right. Then we have all the interesting things of reusing and recycling. This is a recycling plant in one of those countries that is much higher up than we are on that ladder. This is a recycling plant. That's a semi-truck right there.
Wow. Okay.
I think you get the picture. That's a 50-foot long trailer.
Wow.
All right. And then this idea of having access to all of these materials in a new form. So Lego building blocks, anyone? Build your house out of Legos? Yes. And some of these are using hemp and plastic. Some of them are using sawdust and plastic, but it's basically the same technique. a road, built it by a section at a time with all your wires and pipes and everything already in it. It breaks down, you take out the section, you put it back in, no big deal. And this is happening in the Netherlands.
Wow.
And some of you have seen these mats that are being used for driveways and garage floors and such, using the recycled. Well, they're using them for a lot of other things besides what we do. So this is happening all over the world. You know, these are all the northern climes, and then this kind of thing and this kind of thing are the southern climes. Wind, large scale. This is still all high-tech solutions that we're talking about now. So this is one of my favorite things. So this is believe it or not, an electrical turbine. It's an electrical producer. So we use solar heat and to get the water to go up into the pond at the top, and then we use gravity through a turbine to have it flow back down and make electricity.
It's a battery.
It's a battery. Yeah, these are being built all over the world. This one happens to be in Central Europe, but they're being built everywhere. And of course, we have the big wind farms, not my favorite. And then this is solar collectors, and this is large scale wind wave energy.
Wow.
And that's producing, I think that one is a 10 megawatt plant. That's a big one.
Did you see the infrastructure that went in at Driftwood Beach?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, that's for wave generation.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Controversial, but
We've had experimental wave generation on the Oregon coast as long as I've been out here.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is Tesla's roof shingles, solar collector roof shingles. I tried to buy them, but you couldn't get them in Oregon. So this is China. That's a solar collector. This is a couple in Idaho. This is a highway solar collector. And that's what that driveway was on the Elon Musk's smart house, right? And then these guys have figured out they don't have to give up their land for these solar collectors. They can start build them up high enough so that sheep can graze under them, or low enough so that they're growing strawberries under them. So yeah, they're starting to realize this is not, an allocation of land. It's one of the things you do with the land. And I'm really glad to see that.
Yeah.
And so you can do more than one thing.
And that is a fundamental principle.
Where's it there?
That's in China. That's a solar collector in China. That's a large scale, it supplies a whole city with their electricity. So cute. They may be engineers, but they also have creativity. All right, so a bunch of people have done a lot of studies around those 17 goals, and they figured out there are 5 policies that would allow over a 20, 30-year period us to not fall apart completely. Yep. So one is rapid renewable energy growth, okay? So having our emissions from other forms of energy every decade. Another is accelerated sustainable food chains. Okay, that means not farming all over the whole planet. And they want to see at least 1% per year increase. And there are some interesting projects along that line. The third one is new development models. So they're not doing the same thing we did, right? They're developing in better ways. And Ethiopia has been doing marvelous things. And South Korea has been doing some marvelous things. The inequality reduction, and now they're talking not just gender inequality, they're talking racial and age inequality as well. So that ultimately 10% richest are earning less than 40% of the money in the system. And that's what it was prior to the 1970s in this country, by the way. Investment in education for all, right?
Yeah.
Gender equality, health, family planning. So these were the 5 policies that they saw would allow the quality of life to increase over this 50-year period. So the countries that are showing up higher on that 17 points are the ones that are implementing these things. Yeah. I'll make it. All right. I will let you have a break here in a little bit. In fact, now is the time.
That's a little bit.
Yeah. So, there is coffee, there's cold water, there is hot water, there is a bathroom here. And I said we would show off Debbie's painting, so let me get the key so we can do that.
Oh, key to the bathroom?
No, the key to the other room where. Oh.
And so that's it.
More coffee?
No.
Yeah,
Barb,
this
yeah,
one,
and
to change my stuff here. This is from Jewel.
I'm gonna go check
And
on
that-
that.
Yeah.
But you got that.
You need water? I'm gonna fill up my water bottle.
I got water.
Okay.
Thank you. Sleeping, I'm not gonna bother him.
Hey, Ruth, on your vehicles, I don't know if you know this one, I'm a big advocate of e-bike. Globally, the e-bike phenomenon.
Yeah.
Is like, by 1%. Did you know that?
Just e-bikes.
That's e-bikes.
Fabulous, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
And they don't have any.
Come see my picture.
Okay,
Right, I've opened the sanctuary, so if anyone wants to see Debbie's beautiful painting.
I gotta show it to my friend Rob.
So they got you on a lot of creation.
Well, it's inspiring because but she should have some.
Yeah, they never told you that. But I was off all the meds in 6 weeks.
But that's what I enjoy about it. Yeah. Because
How are you doing?
Yeah, I had a little heart surgery. I went to bypass in 2014.
Yeah.
10 years ago.
But the fact that people are, I think what's depressing is.
Yeah, but, they put me
In this
on
nation.
5 different medicines, and when they discharged me, after every one, it said for life, for the rest of your life, you take this. And I was in cardio rehab,
Yeah, you got 2 sugars in
But I
there, so
was-
you're extra sweet.
I was in severe diarrhea. And I was losing weight, and I lost,
I would have weighed down.
Or the.
I lost 7 pounds. I lost,
Which period?
I lost 7 pounds in 1 week, and they wouldn't let me do cardio rehab. They took me directly into the emergency room.
There all the time.
Yeah,
I did that too.
Yeah, and it was, and mine was, I was losing
Well,
fluids and everything,
She
and,
gets on a roll.
it was, fortunately, my primary care person at the time was not a doctor, it was a PA. And she wasn't available, but Dr. Long was, and, he said, you're on the lowest doses of all of these.
Yeah.
He said, I think that's what's causing the diarrhea.
You're not gonna call it now?
And the weight loss and everything. He said, let's just get you off of all of them for 2 weeks. And then come see me and we'll add back in one at a time and see. And see what happens. Also, one of the ones that was just a real.
Doors open next door if you want to.
Diarrhea, upset stomach and indigestion. That was, metoprolol.
That's
It was
coffee.
metoprolol, and it's one
Hot
regular
Coffee.
heart rate.
Very
So
good.
that's when I was off of it for that too. Larry took the buffalo drum and I held it in front of me, and he set the metronome counter on his phone. My resting heart rate was 205, which they thought was fancy. Yeah, 205. They thought was fantastic. Because anytime they work on your heart, it increases your heart rate. And they thought with everything they did, that was okay. And that's why I was on this metoprolol. So without metoprolol for 2 weeks, Larry took the first, I held the drum and he beat it at 95 beats per minute. Just tapped it, just lightly. And I could feel the vibration. I was wearing a Fitbit, so I knew what my heart rate was doing. And it was dropping down to the vibration. And it was staying there. We only did it for 10 minutes. It was, my heart rate stayed down for like 2 or 3 hours. And we did it 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes before I went to bed at night. And I wake up in the morning and it's down. And so the next week, she set it at 85. And same thing happened, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. My heart rate was staying down. And I was not in and I also was having and all of that started clearing up. So yeah, right. After that, he started at 75. And I was feeling better every day. I never went back on any. Ever.
And does she have a price on this?
Hello. I mean, what did he do? It's all good.
Yeah.
Well, I was holding a buffalo drum. Yeah, buffalo drum. It's just a skin high drum.
Yeah, you would have to.
No, I was just holding it. He's kind of out on his phone as a metronome.
Yeah, they're all.
For 95 beats a minute. So the little light would flash at 95 beats a minute, and every time it flashed, he tapped the drum. So he was sending a vibration to my system.
I'm going to take a short.
That changing rate, but my heart rate.
You guys are connected on
And it was staying on the only healing for 10 minutes. I never told him.
I heard.
Well, there is steady vibration and researching it.
So I said, because I didn't want to buy, I said, well, I see more.
They took me to see what gets you.
I started working.
I had these medicines and it's exactly what I've got.
Yeah.
It did turn it down. And they had something just said, I'll take you out for 2 weeks. Well, after 2 weeks, I made an appointment with my primary care lady. And they took me on 2 weeks and said I should come back and see you. I said, how are you feeling? And I said, I'm feeling better than I have. And she said, then. After you notice that all of these other, if you're not having any of the symptoms, there's no reason to go back on medicine. I went back for my 6 week
Time on Facebook.
checkup. Cardiologist took my blood pressure. And it was like 72 or something. 30. Really just, I mean, like, oh, I'm perfect. And my pulse was 74.
I got it. All right. Back in.
Yeah, kids, if you can call it up. And he said, well, so the medicine must be working. And I just looked at it and said, it must be.
We're still ridiculous.
So we started stock in a company
So
called
6 weeks
Net.
after I had my surgery.
Completely traded.
Yeah, that supplies,
Yeah. A lot of cell phone coverage in Africa.
If they put the towers in, don't have to use those, the satellite phone is still locked up.
But yeah,
And when they're trying.
one of the things that I read is.
If you're not on my MailChimp email list, get, you want to sign this because that's how I let people know what I'm doing.
What is to.
Are you on?
Is the expansion of economies. And wow, I don't know. The first time.
I've shared with you. They try to individual.
My favorite part I want to talk to them now. So when we take.
All right.
I've shared it.
And
We're gonna get at, we need to keep going.
What are
you insinuating? You're trying to kick us out?
No, I'm insinuating that you shouldn't have to be here forever.
But we like it here.
Is that the team line and put this together?
Yeah. Humanity's pretty amazing stuff. All right. So all of, yeah, we do all the time. We have faith in machines, so we move mountains.
Well, we could do it another way, but.
So yeah, all of the things that we've talked about so far are the governmental way, the UN's way, the way high-tech people who are materialists think to do things. But there's something happening that they're not aware of. And part of it is they don't understand the nature of culture. They think it's about population and transportation and economy, and maybe it's about all these other things, but there's so much interconnection they can't even conceive.
So would religion be in there?
Yeah, religion right here.
Thank you.
Right there.
I don't have my glasses on.
All right. So we live in what I call empire culture, and that is civilization. We are in civilization. Civis means city. So civilization is from the beginning of cities, which is somewhere around 4000 BC, so about 6,000 years ago. And cities and empires have grown up together because they're based on a set of values that says, I'm going to acquire, I'm going to accumulate, and I'm going to control. Right? So I was involved in something called the Limits to Growth. I got the model to play with right after the book came out. So I was playing with the model, the Limits to Growth model. This is the standard run of the Limits to Growth model. Well, I'm also a culture historian and an archaeologist, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, well, I could say the same thing about Rome or the Incas or the Mayans or
the Greeks. Yeah.
right. They all follow this pattern. Isn't that cool? So they're using up their resources at a rapid rate as their population is increasing, and they're providing a lot of services, and the death rate's been going down, so the population, but then, oh, wow, we've got a lot of trash and a lot of stuff going on out there. And what begins to happen is between the lack of resources and the trash and the pollution, we can't produce as much food, we can't do as much anything, our industrial output goes down, and this pattern happens, and we have the collapse of the empire. Well,
That's amazing. That's an amazing drawing.
I know.
No, that's fascinating.
I love it.
Yeah.
This is called, this is the standard model. And when I had access to the model, I played with it, and we were working with 1955 to 1965 data because that's all there was at the time. And I would push it out and I'd play with this and I'd increase that. And I got it to go out to 2050. Wow. That was as far as I could make it go. They had it between 2025 and 2042.
Mm.
What is the green dashed line and the solid blue vertical line?
This is now.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. This is 2000.
Thank you.
So this is where we are now.
Are births following that pattern based on what you said before?
So right now they're beginning to increase births. Gen Z is having babies. The fundamentalist Christians are saying have a bunch of babies. I just saw a YouTube short. I'm having to tell my husband I'm pregnant again, the 5th time in 6 years. We're telling people you can't have an abortion. We're telling people you can't have a morning after pill. We're telling people, yeah, this is what happens. The birth rate goes up, but the death rate goes up faster. And so we're seeing infant mortality rates in this country go up, and that's part of it. So as you know, we are an empire culture, and this is where we are in this process, which is both hopeful and disturbing.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens as we get to this end stage, this is, that period, this is now over here, okay? And this is the end of it, is the political control systems are climbing. They're going, yeah, we can fix this. We can, get tough on crime. We can build more prisons. We can do whatever. And then they don't have the resources to continue to do it right? And the police get defunded.
And the resources are falling faster than anything else.
Exactly. The resources, the amount of food that can be produced at the level people can eat it, et cetera. And so the other piece that happens is these people get elected on, I can fix it, do it my way. I'm the good guy. I'll make it work. Those guys don't know what they're doing. They're the ones who got you in trouble. And it's almost always the farming communities that elect them.
Oh, yikes.
Why?
Right? Well,
I think it's because they're more conservative, because they want to believe.
they're more ignorant.
Yeah. We saw that in Marin County. Also
Very independent.
Right. They don't want government control. They think the government must be the problem for everything.
And they're wanting to take over their farms and.
Right. And there's an authoritarian religious structure. The empire values are very strong in American farmers and in most farmers in the world.
Even though there's so many subsidies for farmers.
That's not government. Government didn't do that.
Just like it all.
Right. So the way I've seen it is that what we are in the middle of is this blue line here. But if we go back to the beginning of cities, we saw this kind of a process of starting about 4000 BC. And it was a combination of things. At 3200 BC, something happened. We don't know exactly what. We think it might have been an asteroid, and the Sahara, beautiful Great Plains of Sahara with lakes and lots of animals, began to turn into the desert. And the people from the Sahara wandered over to the Nile Valley because that's where the water was, right? The same thing was happening in the Middle East, and they wandered to the Tigris and Euphrates valleys, et cetera. So we start seeing the environmental pressure of moving toward more concentrated populations, and related to that, then we see shifts in technologies. And so we see the beginning of what are collections of houses close together rather than spread out small communities and tribes, right? So that's what began this process, and it grew, and then there were issues, and then it grew, and then there were issues. And in the middle of all of that, this is basically what the expanding fiefdom approach is, basically where the Muslim populations of the world are living, okay, with that set of values. But along about 1000 CE, between 900 and 1100, a bunch of people started going into monasteries in Europe. And the monasteries were set up under the rule of a guy who's called Saint Benedict. And Saint Benedict's rule is very interesting. There are several components, and one of them is that once you become a member of the monastery, brother or sister, whoever you were before no longer counts. You are now equal with everyone. That's interesting. Another one is that everyone will spend some time studying, some time in the silence, and sometimes working for the good of the whole. Everyone. That's interesting. And then another one is that each monastery, although they are part of this hierarchy we call the Catholic Church or the Roman Church, within the monastery, we elect the person that's going to represent us to the rest of the world, the abbot or the abbess. Everyone is equal. We're all contributing equally, and we're electing our leadership. In the world of medieval fiefdoms,
Strange.
very strange. And one order in particular, the Cistercians, starting about between 900, late 900s, started going to different kingdoms, different barons, different landowners and saying, if you'll give us that 50 acres that's on the edge of your property that you've destroyed, is about, it's useless now. We'd like to just set up our little monastery up there. It's just 9 of us, right? And so they do, and they start doing a little shepherding, and they start carding the wool and cleaning the wool and spinning the wool and weaving the wool and inviting people from the community to learn how to do that with them. And they build their monasteries in a way that, well, they're totally self-sufficient, and the water is flowing through them, and they have latrines, and they have water wheels that are running looms and running carding machines. They're basically creating factories.
Wow.
Right? So we've got egalitarian factories that are involving people from the community. And usually these 9 guys over a 10-year period would have 3,000 people associated with them. All of them seeing equal, electing, literate people. You can imagine the impact that had on the generations.
Electing illiterate?
No, they are literate people.
Okay,
They are reading,
okay.
who are electing within the monastery one of themselves to be their leader.
Okay.
Okay, electing their leadership. And that, I am convinced, was the beginning of the Democratic Republic. Was those monasteries spread out through Europe and then into Africa and then further out as the months, went off into other countries.
Yeah.
Not all of them functioned on St. Benedict's rule, and there are groups, the Dominicans, that did more harm than good.
Well, and the
But-
Church of England wasn't really big on the monasteries, right?
That was 1600 though, so we're talking 600 years later.
Yeah.
It couldn't do what it did if it hadn't been for these guys for 600
Right,
years.
right, but then it was so successful that they were threatened by it.
Bingo,
right?
and that was a huge part. The monarchs are going, oh my God.
Right.
These
Wow.
people are living better, and the people around them are living better, and so on. There is a wonderful set of YouTubes that's on the monastery farm in the 1400s. Isn't that marvelous?
Oh,
Yeah. So a couple of historians and archaeologists dress and eat and live and farm
For a year.
on
Each
according
time.
to the periods that they're in. And this one is the monastic in
Yeah.
England in
We
the
watched every one
1400s.
of them. They're just FYI.
They are marvelous.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
There are still monasteries doing this today.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They'll pick people to go and stay there.
Absolutely, absolutely. St. Benedict's rule is fabulous.
I think I took Barb to one kind of down out of Florence, Arizona. And it's that monastery I took.
Oh, right.
There's some up around Crestone, Colorado too.
Oh.
And there's
Oh,
a few in New Mexico, yeah. So these guys
And I took
basically are the seed of what became the Democratic Republic. Now, the Templars grew out of that same rule. The Templars become the Freemasons when they get wiped out in 1327.
Right.
Okay, well, all of the founding fathers of America were Freemasons.
Until John Kennedy.
Yeah, founding fathers, I said.
But all of them were.
Virtually every president prior to 1960 was a Freemason. But that whole way, when you join the order, your rank outside is irrelevant. We are, we are all studying, we are all praying, and we are all electing our leadership. So the Democratic Republic gets formed slowly but steadily and grows. By the 1850s, that's what this point is, we have virtually every country in Europe has had a revolution, and they are some kind of constitutional democratic republic. They may or may not have a king, okay, a monarch. So, and then that continues to grow, and then there's a dip, during a lot of periods, and a lot of reasons, but then it grew. Well, we have this limit to how much the earth can handle. And that's why we have global climate change. We exceeded that. But along about 2000, and because I've chosen these numbers, I said 2000, but for me, this is 1965. Okay. What is going on in 1965? Oh, come on.
Vietnam War,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, the Vietnam War, what? Okay, Johnson, all right, so we're looking a little too gradual, too fine. In 1965, the book The Silent Spring was popular.
Oh, yeah.
The book, Pete Seeger was popular. The Tragedy of the Commons came out, Barry Commoner's book came out, the Beatles came out. Right?
The Diggers.
The Diggers, right? All of those people. So what we got was the seed, in the same way that these monks here are the seed, we get the seed of a new kind of culture with a new way of relating. And it's new technologies and new values regarding the earth. In 1965, the personal computer is possible. Not really, but it's sort of.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah. And I was key punching in 1965. A lot of college students were doing computing, and you were doing it. Yeah. So, that was happening. We were killing electronic adding machines in my high school lab. That's another story. So all of that stuff started in that 65 period. Again, a long, slow, but today is now. Notice where we are. Remember where we were on that other set of curves. We're here, falling down. And this one is taken off.
So that's the shift.
That's the shift, right? So this is the kind of thing that's happening online. The low-tech magazine, isn't that great?
Yeah, I like it. Doubts on progress and technology.
Right? This one, 30% of carbon cuts by 2030, just by changing how we're doing our land use from this to this, right? This is a sustainable community with, community center, and everyone's producing, and all kinds of biodiversity and all that good stuff, right? We are seeing in all kinds of places people reclaiming the land for food production that had been turned into other things in other ways of doing things. I love this one. In Tormorton, UK, the garden club was seeing people at food banks without fresh foods while they were planting garden, flowers in the parks. And they said, no, we're going to park lettuces and kales in the parks. And you go by the city hall and the police station there, and the parking strip has corn and strawberries and peas that you pick.
Nice.
I love it.
Yeah.
There's if you ever saw The Global Gardener with Bill Mollison, there's a suburb of Davis, California, where all of the landscaping is edibles. And the kids go and they grab their lunch while they're playing. This is a suburban community in Switzerland. Everything is a food production. The whole house, the whole yard, greenhouses, they're producing all of their own foods, all their fruits and vegetables as much as they can. And, more and more people are inviting different kinds of plants instead of just grass. This is Baltimore, where, I don't know if you've ever been in Baltimore. It is the saddest city I've ever been in. And they're starting to reclaim for plants areas that were just torn down, worn out buildings. So,
Well, some places they put gardens on roofs.
oh yeah, A lot of places, in fact, in Oregon, in,
Well,
in Portland, yeah, and I just have a photograph I just put on my computer. In parts of Japan and Korea, South Korea, they're taking the covered parking structures and the covers are all gardens.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So these are school gardens. This is, the kids are raising food as part of going to school.
Hey,
There's the zero waste shops I talked about, right? And this is how you can store food without a refrigerator.
It's like my grandparents' basement.
Bingo. Exactly, the root
Exactly.
cellar. My grandparents too. You know, my great aunt and uncle anyway on the farm. But yeah, the same kind of a thing. And yeah, you hang your whatever food you've got that needs to be hung, and you put them in jars and all of that stuff. So low income buying and low impact buying and low impact storage. There's these other fun things. This woman's a woman in Holland, and this is her version of what we saw, the basement. This is her access to a root cellar. She's created
It's
a,
like an old bum show.
it does, doesn't it? Well, probably so it works for that too. But it's just a self-contained unit. You put it on your property, you build the berm around it, and you've got your root cellar. Someone is saying, well, if all else fails, just put your ice chest in the ground.
There you go.
Yeah, right. This is a 16-year-old in this country figuring out an ancient technology. You take one flower pot that's, you know, it's water and air can move through, and you take another flower pot that water and air can move through. You fill the space in between with sand or vermiculite or anything else that air and water can move through. And what happened, and then you've got, you know, the air moving through and the water moving through, and that cools the inner chamber 20 to 30 degrees.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Right. So you store your fruits and vegetables in the inner chamber. All you have to do is keep the sand moist. That's all you have to do. Right. And it doesn't have to be clean water.
Yeah.
So
Out of a plastic bottle.
in this case, that's what she's got. But here's more plastic bottles. So I'd like you to invite you to hold your hand in front of your mouth and just breathe with your mouth wide open.
A lot of heat coming down.
All right. Now breathe with your mouth, your lips pursed.
Cool.
Right on. That's what we're talking about here.
Isn't that amazing?
These are soda bottles plugged into holes on a piece of cardboard. They cut into the metal siding on their shack. They're putting that board up. They are cooling the interior of that shack by 15 to 20 degrees. Whoa. Wow. And they're adding light.
Wow.
Yeah. When we are not thinking high tech and allowing our imaginations to actually use, you know, what's real, we can have all kinds of things. People are building houses out of everything.
Yeah.
This is water bottles. I don't recommend it in Oregon. This is, you know, all kinds of drinking bottles. Those are all glass bottles, and it's just a mortar with the glass bottles. Part of the earth ships are
I was
made
gonna
that
say,
way.
I saw an earthship that
Yeah.
had the whole wall.
Yeah,
like that.
you can do that. Notice the light quality and notice what you can do with the patterns.
Yeah.
These are plastic bags,
Wow.
just plastic bags made as bricks and on a wire frame that's basically rebar. It's just rebar. That is a very inexpensive, well-insulated wall. This is a monastery in one of the Southeast Asian countries, and
Is that what the priests all drank?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually medicine bottles. But they're flat and kind of square, so you can do them that way. So we don't have to build stick frame houses with 2x4s that are from, you know, clear cutting forests, etc. And each climate can have a different kind of structure, you know. So as we move forward, we can make use with whatever here. This is north of Santa Rosa on the back road up to the hot springs.
Wow.
Yeah, this is down in, I think it's Colombia, it might be Costa Rica. A plane landed, it fell out of the sky. So someone turned it into a home and a B&B. And yeah, a lot of you, I'm sure, have seen the shipping container homes that are happening now and the school bus homes. Yeah.
Shipping.
All right. But in other parts of the world, they're going back to the older technologies. This is rammed earth, which is basically what our ships are made out of. They've got forms that they've built and they've found the earth into the form, right? These are mud, and I love this picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, decorating their home.
Wow.
I just think that's lovely. These are Tibetan women. They're doing something like rammed earth. It's more like a slurry that they're putting into there and then, evening it out and drying it. And I love the hobbit houses. Yeah. So this is what you were trying to build in Arizona, right? When you do it right. And then if you add the greenhouse, you've made a more or less closed system with your water, your air, and your plants. And it's just a marvelous way of doing it. This is happening clearly all over the world. They are saying we need to go back to the style that works for the location we're in, rather than what those Europeans thought was the only way to build.
Yeah.
And we can have water processes that do not use even solar energy, really. This is a solar thing, but it's made out of local clay. So you have the black lid, so it causes the water that you put in the lower pan to come up and condense on the lid, and then the upper pan is your clear water. This is a siphon in a harbor. A couple surfers got tired of the trash, so they put this bucket with a long hose on it, basically.
Wow.
And it siphons whatever's, and it floats around in the harbor and picks up whatever, and the water flows through, and the stuff stays in the buckets.
A new take on Roomba.
Right? I love it. So this is something, water travels in spirals. And if I ever do another water workshop, we'll talk a lot about that. Notice this is a natural formation. Water makes it so it will spiral. It aims to spiral. If you ever wondered why water goes zigzag across, say, because it's spiraling. And if you've ever been in a white water raft, right, it's spiraling. That's what it's doing. Well, some guy sat down and said, well, I can make water do that. So this is a secondary sewage treatment plant.
Wow. So Ruth, isn't the way water travels is by shooting off, spiraling? It's shooting off the spiral of itself.
Yep.
All the time.
That's what it does.
The momentum.
That's what it does, right? It builds, each spiral builds on the others, right?
Yeah.
And so this is just to encourage it. And literally, that is a secondary sewage treatment plant.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Going down into a trout pond from a hog farm. Yes.
That's nasty water.
It was nasty water. It got filtered. The manure got turned into compost. And then the secondary process of what I just saw. This is hydroelectric. This is wave electric, wind electric. And this is, someone had built this thing across their river. So he's figured out a way to make it so there's a little electric outlet here without affecting the flow of the river. Transportation. This is recycled plastic to repave the road. That's all it is. And they're using the heat of the sun to melt it and turn it into a road. This is normal in India and in much of the world, actually. No seatbelts. Right? And this is happening more and more all over the world. And we're starting to see these kinds of things happen again. As we rethink our roads and our transportation, and Jocko was just telling me that 1% of oil consumption worldwide has been reduced because people are using the little electric bikes. Another thing that's beginning to happen is education involving children in their life. So these are kids learning their cultural traditions and songs, kids playing in leaves as part of daycare. I love it, right? Kids learning how to build things together in teams, not all by themselves, but this is so cool. Most Japanese schools don't employ janitors or custodians. They don't employ cooks and waiters either.
Awesome.
The kids do it all. And they say requiring students to clean the school themselves teaches respect, responsibility, and emphasizes equality. This is what is happening in the world, folks. This is what's going on everywhere. And there are more and more of these kinds of town meetings, as well as Zoom, and as well as the showing up in the courtroom or the city council. So we got high tech and high touch. The high tech, low tech, we've got the large scale and the micro scale. We've got leading edge and we have ancient, all working together. And that is what we will see more of. We had a period of about 50 years where all the high touch, low scale, all of that wasn't allowed, right? It wasn't okay. But now we're getting it reintegrated into the way we do things. So the future is going to be some combination of this, and it's going to be distinctive to each community, each region. So what happens in Oregon and Washington and Northern California up into Southern Alaska is different from what happens in Idaho and Arizona, right? For all kinds of reasons. So this mixture of high tech, these guys are using cell phones to rebuild the roads that were destroyed after the Brits left.
Looks like they're using a wheelbarrow.
They're using wheelbarrows and shovels, but their cell phone is telling them how long, what direction, what next to do. Right? This is a bunch of women it was 8 women in England who were told they had to go to assisted living. So they pooled their money and they built 8 units and they built gardens and on a single housing unit, housing block, right? This is a solar electric collector. It's plant-based. That is electricity flowing on those zigzags. It's a plant-based. And this is a totally sealed building in China. They have fun.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's one thing that's happening. The other thing is in the realm of consciousness. We've got whole new ways of thinking emerging in the world today. We are feeling connected. We are knowing that our thoughts affect us. I cannot believe that, again, it's an exponential curve. When I started doing even my radio show, which is only in its 3rd year, I was lucky to find something. Now I'm finding things every day. It's just beautiful. My Noetic Moments radio show. So we know that who we are is receiving electromagnetic waves and sending out electromagnetic waves, and that's affecting each other in these morphogenetic fields, right? And we're learning to do this. And we're also realizing that who and what we are energetic systems as well as physical systems. And so our consciousness is literally shifted from where we were even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago as humanity. And some people have suggested that this April with the solar eclipse was kind of the outer sign of the shift that happened this April, so that it's almost impossible to not follow that inner guidance in some way now. You're getting it in a way you can't ignore it.
And the aurora borealis too.
As part, that sun shift. Wow,
that was a big shift.
Right. So time frame by which things change in human cultures. So this is 1965. All of the things I just said aren't possible unless you read the whole Earth catalog. But as far as the culture is concerned, that's just pipe dreams. That's not happening, right? But there's all these different things that are just beginning to form in those first 10, 15 years. So between 65 and 80, they're just beginning to get off the ground. Literature leads the way, right? Organizations followed soon after. There begin to be advocates and authorities. There begin to be Earth Day events and things like that, right? And then finally the government comes along. And then finally, there are rules that say, we have to live that way. And by then, we don't need the voluntary groups anymore because it's already part of what's going on. So this is a 75-year process for something to become normal in our culture. And guess where we are? Right here. Isn't that cool?
So the line's dropping just means normal.
It's now normal. They don't have to do all these things to make it happen.
It's just part
Right.
of it.
I mean, do we need to have organizations tell us to, wear clothing?
Yeah.
There was a time we did.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I never listened to them.
Listen, it's cold out.
So just a reminder, this is where we are in this process, right? So what are the values? I told you the values of this empire culture were acquire, accumulate, and control. And that led to disastrous exploitation of people and objects and things. It led to, all kinds of waste and, all kinds of hoarding. Hoarding was part of it, all of that. Whereas this emerging culture seems to have a very different set of values. And as I look at indigenous cultures, yeah, they look a lot like this. And as I look at the Unitarian Universalist values, guess what? These are their principles. In 1965, the Unitarian Universalist Association accepted these principles. That was one of the seeds, just like the monks in the monasteries were the seed of democracy. These guys are the seed of the emerging culture. So the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, the acceptance of others regardless of our differences, seeking always a just and equitable and compassionate relationship, right? In our own lives, searching for truth and meaning, together working, using the democratic process, and then working toward a global community, not a global economy, not a global empire, not a global United Nations running everything, but a community. And that's what these homes and the internet have allowed and encouraged. All of that in the context of the interconnected web of life that we're all part of, all the animals and the sea, water and the soil and all of that good stuff. And we're learning in every one of these areas huge amounts in this current decade. So
the thing that
family.
puzzles me about the democratic process is that both in Europe and here, we've got an undertow of I want to rule like Russia.
right, and you missed that slide. That is a normal stage in the process where we are in the process. If you look at where Germany was when Hitler was elected, if you look where Rome was when Caligula was the emperor, you'll see they are the same point in the process. Yeah. All right,
So history is really important there.
it helps
And
to
the
have studied
repetition
history.
of the way things manifest.
Right, empires always go through that process. And
That's-
part of that process
I
is
totally agree
these
with
guys,
that.
yeah, coming in, I have all the answers, elect me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, please don't. All right, so right now, what we're going through is more confusion, more inability to respond. That's because we don't have the systems in place. We're going to see more fear and more attempts to control because of the fear, right? All right, we're going to see decreased stability in all the institutions that are based on the empire culture. But that means increased opportunity to introduce alternatives, whether they're high tech. I have seen in the last month a dozen different ways to clean up waste that never existed before. High tech and low tech. I just discovered that you can take a motherboard and use standard household acids and enzymes and extract the gold, the copper, and the silver from it. Isn't that cool? We don't need these horrid, nasty chemicals anymore, all of that, right? And we're going to start seeing more and more off-world alternatives all over the world, right?
What's off-world mean?
Moon, asteroids, Mars, hanging out in space in the space station.
I do that often.
Exactly.
Do you think space of the moon, I can see Mars, you think efforts to go to Mars is right? One thing when we need to be taking care of our own planet?
I think we will have people doing that regardless.
Regardless, I agree with you.
As long as they can find the resources, they will do it.
Yeah.
Finances, yeah.
Right. Okay, so over the next 10 years, starting now, right? Then we begin to, we feel those environmental changes more and more, which means the breakdown of large scale systems, the power grids, the water treatments, the garbage, et cetera, and more attempts to control.
Yeah.
And more incentives for people to go to work for a living, but people aren't going to take it because they're abandoning the cities and the arid lands and the coast, and they're continuing to explore solutions and increased home food production and preservation. That's that's going to be happening more and more. I'm seeing it more and more too. All age groups. It's beautiful. Then as we go from the 30s to 2050, then we've adapted to environmental unpredictability. We're choosing to live in ways and to have our lives built in ways that, oh, there's a tornado coming. We're good. Oh, that storm is coming through again. We can handle that, right? That's how we're going to be. And it'll be local governments that are dealing with the local environmental issues and the goods and services production, distribution, and the education. Far less than these national, federal, international,
Or even
whatever.
state.
Yeah, even less than states, So, and by 2050, most households will be 80 to 90% self-sufficient using permaculture basics. And high tech is always available, but it'll be in different limited ways because we won't be supporting the infrastructure. So you might have a village where there is a community center where everyone can use computers and be on the internet, but the homes don't have Wi-Fi and they don't want Wi-Fi. They don't want that energy in their homes, right? That kind of thing. So what is our strategy now, right? We need to see our desired world now. We need to envision the emerging culture, not get caught up in what the media is trying to get us to focus on, right? But to see what can be. And you can also, try to focus on the good of a world in which humanity lives and breathes and works in harmony with nature and spirit. What does that look like? What does that feel like? You can create your own home in a way that reflects your ideal of the world. That may be that you're living in a very small space using very little, sharing a lot more. It may mean all kinds of things. Wean your household off of mass-produced goods and services. Use the thrift stores if you got to have one. Ignore most of what the internet politicians and media said. It is all self-serving. It is all designed to keep the empire culture going in a way they are comfortable with. It is not serving you. What you need to hear, you will hear. That's the nature of this new consciousness. What is pertinent to you, you will know. Your friends will tell you, you will happen to hear it, you will happen to walk by something. Oh, Linda's thinking of something in particular.
No, well, it was just most of the time, the way I find out what is going on in the world is during prayer requests at church.
All else. Oh, I love it. And finally, choose the principles. Back to that flower, right? That you want your children and grandchildren to live by. And then think, feel, and speak them. Be those principles, right? Don't try to adjust to what they're thinking and doing. Go, oh, that's very interesting. I think I would be more comfortable if it looked like this. Don't negate or degrade or in any way, upset what they're doing, but recognize where you're trying to go is different.
It's about modeling.
That's right. And this is building the world. Okay. So you either go out and create your own homestead, right? And you do all the other things that we just said, right? To build the world now, you are actually physically creating a structure or a set of structures that lives in this way. So from my version of Florence Scovel Shinn, people who train the mind to see only good bring all the good they can imagine into their lives. Health, wealth, love, friends, perfect self-expression, and their highest ideals come into form.